that's what we come down to Baden Hall Glovers for. What a fish. Was here for 5 minutes, popped a floater on their head. They do love a floater in here, and this is the result. A beautiful mirror. And believe it or not, there are plenty in here, a lot bigger than this one. What a fish. Well, here we are in Peg 1, my favourite peg on Glovers, because it's the first place I ever caught a Glovers carp, and I've caught a lot here since. It's the widest point of Glovers. It's about 140, 150 yards to get right in the corner. So it's a nice sanctuary for the fish. It's where, like today, you've got a nice easterly on. Any sort of wind from the south or the east blows directly into that corner, and the fish love it down here. Now, average depth changes quite a lot. It's quite shallow on the far side, but it drops away quickly. So you're going into from 2, 3, 4 feet straight down into 7 feet. There's some deeper holes over to the left-hand side, and you've got this whole left-hand margin where there's nobody else who could interfere with your fishing. A fantastic peg, and one that also does a lot of big fish. Now, one method that works really well on all of the specimen lakes here at Baden Hall, especially on Glovers, is floating baits. Surface fishing down here can be absolutely awesome. You have to win their trust and bait up with just a few baits every now and again until they start taking. If you put lots and lots of baits on the water, it's much more difficult to get a bite. And of course, you can also catch them free lining on a bit of bread or just a single mixer and catch them off guard. This is why I love the Glovers pool. These fish are feral as anything. You get left alone, doesn't get fished anywhere near as much as the other lakes. And quite often the fish go more than a year without being caught. They scrap like hell. Fish like that are why you come down here. Look at that. Carved from mahogany, an absolute beauty. Guess what he was a sucker for? This time, a bit of black foam. We saw him showing out in open water. I thought, worth a try on the black foam, they've got to be mid-water. And sure enough, this one, drifting in between the weed beds. Happy days. Well, how should you approach Baden Glovers when you come down here? Well, I'm going to break it up into the 4 seasons, because that really does make a difference down here at Baden on the specimen lakes. So let's start with just coming out of winter. It's spring. Now, for me, the best technique you can bring down to these fisheries before all the weed gets up is zig rig fishing. Pick your colours based on your favourites. Black is very good, black and red can be very good, and of course yellow can be very good as well. A good distance to start is basically a foot or 2 feet below the surface. I always say try and fish below the surface the depth of the fish that you'd like to catch, and with a lot of 40-pounders swimming around, that's a couple of feet. Another great tactic for the early part of the year is single hook baits. Pick your favourite pop-up rig, whether that be a chod rig, a Ronnie rig, it doesn't really matter. Something you're confident with. These fish aren't especially riggy. They can be a bit later in the summer, but in the spring they're still a bit green. They've had a nice bit of time off since the last time a fish got caught. Colours, I'll leave it entirely down to you. Bright ones can be very effective, but also don't neglect just picking your favourite food bait boilie. It could be any bait out there. Again, pick your favourite, put the hook bait on, and if you see a fish show, make sure your bait lands in the rings of where that fish is shown. Now, what about areas to target in the spring? Well, I really like targeting shallower water in the spring. You tend to find that the fish down here spend a lot of time up in the water, thus the reason that the zig rig fishing is good. So if you are going to fish down on the deck, try and find the shallow area in your swim. Here on Glovers, that can really pay off. The zigs you can fish over deeper water. And you've got some spots at Baden Glovers where you've got 7 and 8 feet of water. Most of it's about 5 foot out in the middle. But those deeper areas, the fish seem to quite like having quite a lot of water underneath them when they're chilling around up in the layers. So if you're going to fish for the spring, that would be my advice. Now let's talk about summer, my favourite time at Baden Hall, especially here on Glovers. Because of the shallow water, it can fish really, really well in very, very bright conditions like we've got now. I had 2 fish on this trip. I can't remember a summer trip where I haven't caught when I've come down here. It is a fantastic summer venue. One of the key areas on the lake in the summer, there's a far margin. Now you've got to go and walk the far margin regardless of what peg you're in. Just see if the fish are there. If they're not there, then the fish will be in open water and you can concentrate on the spots out there. For me, summer at Glovers means putting a bit of bait in. They really like particles, especially things that are sort of sweet corn, maize kind of size. They love hemp. They absolutely love hemp and pellets. And of course, there are days where they just want a nice big spread of boilies. So summer is a great time to get a bit of bait in, lay a few traps and catch numbers of fish. Well, let's talk about autumn. Now, autumn was the time I spent most of my time fishing on Glovers actually. I was very fortunate to be able to come and test fish Glovers before it opened, and most of those sessions were sort of September through to November, and we caught a lot of fish. It was fantastic. Most of the fish we caught were on quite long pop-up rigs, so imagine like a hinge rig or a chod rig or something, because you had quite a lot of dying weed around, and all we did was fan boilies around. We were baiting up with boilies. It was absolutely brilliant. We also picked up the odd fish on solid bags placed on little marginal clear spots that we could see on the warmer days. Autumn down here can be absolutely electric fishing. Let's talk about winter at Glovers. It's a totally different proposition to the rest of the year. The one great thing about Glovers, because it's shallow, it warms up really, really quickly. And you'll find that the fish head to areas of sand. So either at the far margin, you've got a lot of sandy bank, especially in front of pegs 6 and 7. You've got a sandbar that runs across on just short of the far margin in front of pegs 3 and 4. And of course, you've got all the far end of peg 8, where it's basically a sandy bottom all the way along. The fish seem to head to these areas in the winter, and you've also got some deeper holes that you might pick up a few fish on zigs, chods, that kind of thing. The winter fishing can be fantastic on naturals. If you get a good low pressure front, they will switch on to maggot, castor and worms and baits like that, but for the most part you're really searching out for the fish. Use singles, bags, zigs, search around the swim and see if you can find them. So here at Baden Hall Glovers, you've got 8 swims. Starting at peg 1, it's the widest point of the lake. It's 140 to 150 yards to get right into the corner and tight to the far margin. The fish do spend a lot of time there, so if you can't quite reach them, spend some time stalking on the far margin. It might be a great way of getting a bite on your trip. As you go down the lake, you'll come into pegs 2 and 3 and 4. Now in front of 2, 3 and 4, you've got access to a sandbar. And the sandbar is about 30 yards off the far margin, so only about a 80, 90 yard cast. And for most people, that's well within reach. The fish love this area, and it's where we caught most of the carp before Glovers opened to the public, and I've caught a lot of fish from there since. As you go down the lake, peg 5 and 6, it's much narrower here. It's only 80 yards to the far margin, and the far margin itself is actually very shallow. It's only maybe 1 foot, 2 foot, so you don't need to go that close to the far side unless you've got a piping hot day like today and you actually want to be in the shallow water. In front of 7 and 8, it goes deeper again. You've got a nice 7 foot area there and a really nice margin on the right hand side of peg 8. It's the end of the lake. It's good to go and walk along this margin and just see if you can see where the fish are. Sometimes just the distance they are from the bank, or how far down they are in the water, will help you make a decision about what depth to fish in on your trip. 8 swims down here at Baden Hall on Glovers. Fantastic fishing, loads of water between each of you. You can't really interfere with each other's fishing as you're all over on one bank. Can't beat it if you ask me. Yes! Well, there you go, a bit of Baden gold. There's a lot of fish like this in Glovers, loads of 20s like this, absolutely mega. Look how dark they are. Don't make them any finer than that if you ask me. What a beauty. Off the deck, over a load of particle and boilies. They do like a munch this time of year. Absolutely awesome.